Reactions to and impacts of Emancipation Proclamation. Throughout American history, slavery was accepted as an essential aspect of society and was deeply embedded into Southern culture and the basis of its economy. The North moving away from that ideal is a significant reason for the commencement of the Civil War. It should therefore not come as a surprise that Lincoln faced considerable support as well as opposition on emancipation, even from other Northern leaders. This opposition had a variety of roots from political to economic interests, but Lincoln's unwavering faith in the Unions and his own righteousness and determination would affect the way the public viewed the proclamation greatly. At the beginning of the Civil War, there was no clear way to treat escaped slaves that fled to stay with the Union Army. Some officers took the stance that the Southern states were now a foreign entity as they had seceded from the Union, which did not necessitate any laws to be followed that applied to the Union. This means that said officers didn't feel obligated to follow fugitive slave laws any longer and allowed the runaway slaves to stay with the Army. Others, including Abraham Lincoln, or the Great Emancipator, as well as many other Northern leaders, disapproved of that train of thought because it recognized the South as a valid foreign nation. The Emancipation Proclamation resolved this issue by outlawing slavery for the South, thereby removing the need for Union officers to return runaway slaves while refusing to recognize the South's independence. Despite the leaders' stances on the issue, the contraband often proved themselves to be very useful. They took up tasks such as constructing fortifications for nominal wages and later participated in combat with 16 all-black regiments in the Union Army. As the war went on, Lincoln made a move that would change the aim of it from a political one, keeping the Union intact, to a moral one, ending the institution of slavery. His Emancipation Proclamation, originally released on September 22, 1862, would go into effect on January 1st of the following year if the South persisted in their rebellion after the original announcement. By mid-1862, most Northerners supported abolition as being one of the main goals of the war, which made Lincoln's decision much easier. His handwritten document sat in his desk for months before he presented it to his cabinet. The document begins by urging Confederates of all statuses to return to the Union and goes on to say that, quote, "As a fit and necessary military measure for effecting this object, I, as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within any state or states wherein the constitutional authority of the United States shall thenceforward and forever be free." He read it aloud to his cabinet in a meeting on July 22, 1862. He was met with immediate support from a couple of his advisors, but hesitancy and disapproval from others. Even Lincoln himself, months before coming up with the idea, expressed that an Emancipation Proclamation would not achieve the desired end of keeping the Union intact. The men of the cabinet were asked to speak their opinions from their hearts, but that his own was set on this idea. As he persisted, many other cabinet members gave in, suggesting their own details, such as not compensating the South for the loss of slaves. Overall, the presidential order made it clear that there was no hope of reuniting the original Union and that war would have to be the solution. Therefore, the Union did what they could to make the war easier for themselves, which Lincoln famously made clear when he said that, quote, "Without slavery, the rebellion could never have existed. Without slavery, it could not continue." They accomplished this by removing an element of strength from the Confederacy and creating a significant weakness. This weakness, however, was painted by the New York Herald to be a golden opportunity for the South, as they were presented with the opportunity to jump ship from their falling rebellion back to their loyalty to the Union. Another reason for the outlaw of slavery was so that European powers would stop taking the side of the Confederacy and drive them away from intervention. The South and Britain were close trading partners, which made them allies in a fashion. Britain said that they would recognize the Confederacy as a valid nation if they could show in battle that they were a genuine power and possibly offer military aid to them. The North was desperate to avoid such a thing occurring. By changing the meaning of the war, in which supporting the South is the moral equivalent of supporting the existence of slavery, Lincoln could put Britain in a difficult position in which they may hesitate to aid the South. The move, however, would be seen as a desperate cry for help, validating the South's independence by recognizing their power, if not done at a time of victory. Lincoln needed to wait, and wait he did. The timing of the release of the proclamation maximized the benefits of it, which portrayed the document in a good light, which persists until today. The opportunity for the South to receive foreign intervention and recognition presented itself as Generally pushed his way northward all the way into Pennsylvania, stringing wins together by taking advantage of General McClellan's incompetence. James Mason, a Confederate foreign diplomat, strongly felt that recognition is not far off, and likely was not wrong at the time. However, this all changed with the Confederate crushing defeat at Gettysburg and a bloody loss at Antietam. The change in events gave Lincoln the opportunity he needed in order to release his Emancipation Proclamation. He was even more sure of the decision after he promised himself that, if God gave us victory in the approaching battle, he would consider it an indication of divine will and that it was his duty to move forward in the cause of emancipation. 5 days after the Union victory at Antietam, Lincoln announced his intentions to outlaw slavery for the South. Despite his timing with Union victory, Lincoln's proclamation was still viewed as a sign of weakness in the eyes of many European countries. Anti-American conservatives in Britain were of the opinion that the proclamation was not substantive enough to be a genuine act, and its intended function was to get the Confederacy out of favor with it, or to possibly inspire a slave revolt. Even foreign anti-slavery activists criticized the measure. In the words of Lord Russell, who had previously censured Lincoln for not helping the anti-slavery cause enough, it encouraged, quote, acts of plunder, of incendiarism, and of revenge. These sentiments, however, did not last long. The London Morning Star spoke of the proclamation as a gigantic stride in the path of Christian and civilized progress, an act only second in courage and probable results to the Declaration of Independence. Many of Lincoln's criticizers changed their minds once the final proclamation had been issued on January 1st, as they believed that the original announcement was merely a political play. Europe as a whole began to side with the Union within the month of the activation of the proclamation. Support for the Confederacy quickly declined despite strong anti-Lincoln sentiment surfacing early in the process. Richard Cobden expressed Europe's views at the time as he said that recognition of the South by England, whilst it bases itself on Negro slavery, is an impossibility. Quickly, the South's ally and trading partner began to fade away as Lincoln freed 4 million African American slaves from their shackles. But the outcome of the proclamation cannot be used solely to determine the president's intentions in using it. Alan Guelzo argues that, if intervention and morale were Lincoln's primary concerns, then an Emancipation Proclamation was probably the worst method, and at the worst time at which to have met them. This is because an outlaw on slavery would undoubtedly affect Europe, and very possibly trigger foreign intervention just as the continued Confederate victories could. The proclamation was certainly a gamble, but a well thought out one by Lincoln. Americans from across the country undeniably benefited economically from the institution of slavery. Many recognized this, and, especially in the South, there was significant opposition to the emancipation policies. Union soldiers even predominantly opposed the move, and included in this section was General McClellan himself, who genuinely reconsidered his own loyalty to the Union, as he wrote to his wife that he was unable to make up my mind to fight for such an accursed doctrine as that of a servile insurrection. Ultimately, however, McClellan came to the conclusion that it was his duty to submit to the President's authority and continue his service as a soldier. Despite making this clear to his men, the issue continued to divide them for another half of the year, with very likely the majority siding against Lincoln's decision as sentiment of future inevitable slave insurrections rapidly spread throughout the South. The Great Emancipator did not directly emancipate many slaves initially, as his proclamation applied solely to the Confederacy. Northern states were not obliged to comply with it, although slavery was very uncommon in the North, as it had been abolished for years earlier for most states. This occurred because Lincoln issued the proclamation under the authority to suppress a rebellion, which necessarily excluded it affecting states that were not participants in the rebellion. Therefore, it applied directly to 3 to 4 million Southern slaves, many of whom shared the feeling of Frederick Douglass when he recalled that, "I never saw enthusiasm before, I never saw joy before. Men, women, young and old were up. Hats and bonnets were in the air, and we have 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and 3 cheers for about everybody else." This joy expressed by many abolitionists and slaves alike was felt to be long overdue and well-deserved. Abraham Lincoln Demond, or A.L. Demond, an African-American civil rights activist, wrote of one of his views on the matter when he asserted, "This is the starry emblem of a nation's hope, beneath which brave black men mingled their precious lifeblood with the waters of Lake Erie and Lake Champlain in defense of American seamen and American honor. That is the flag for which our fathers and brothers fought and died. Those are the stars and stripes which they followed to freedom and to glory, and for which they laid upon the altar of this nation the sacred sacrifice of life." Demond makes it clear that many black lives have been put on the line for the country in an effort to prove their worth, and the recognition is only just now beginning. As asserted by Frederick Douglass, the abolition of slavery was not enough to recognize the African American community for the fights they had endured in making the United States the country it was at the time. It was a step in the right direction, and for that he was grateful to President Lincoln, but it was obvious that he was still a president for the white portion of America predominantly. Douglass issued his problems with Lincoln's administration as he clarified that he was ready and willing at any time during the first years of his administration to deny, postpone, and sacrifice the rights of humanity and the colored people to promote the welfare of the white people of this country. Lincoln told African American slaves that they were the cause of the war, that he would refuse to arm them in order for them to defend their freedom, that he refused to take action against discriminatory crimes within his army, that he stated that he would save the Union if it meant keeping slavery, and finally that he rejected Major General John C. Fremont's Proclamation of Emancipation, which was proposed before Lincoln's own. Although there was severe neglect to the African American population by Abraham Lincoln, Douglass still respected him and was grateful for emancipation. African American labor, now freed from slavery, competed with white labor in an unprecedented fashion and affected Southern wealth drastically. African American farmers, even on a small scale, did then compete more with white farmers. It is estimated that slaves made up nearly half of the South's wealth in 1860. Requests for business loans among slaveholders also drastically declined after emancipation, showing how much wealth was really tied up in slavery. They were a good to be traded and insured, which undoubtedly contributed to the economic well-being of many states. Slave owners were at a loss in terms of uncompensated black labor hours and their primary store of value. Slavery undeniably contributed heavily to the development of the United States, and its discontinuity had considerable repercussions. Reactions to Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation were drastically varying from a wide variety of sources. It was praised for being progressive by Europe and some civil rights leaders, and criticized for being a political bluff by others. It was also significantly impactful in social, political, and economic fashions. It united African American labor with white labor in new ways, made contraband of war free men, and stopped a foreign intervention in favor of the Confederacy. It was a risky effort, but a liberty-giving one.